I think there's something going on with Cardano and Southeast Asia. I don't know exactly what it is, but whatever it is, I think this region is perfect for Cardano right now. Ready? Let's go. This is very early. We don't know too much at this point, but we've had some hints. And I have a really good feeling about this because Southeast Asia may be perfectly positioned for Cardano in terms of where the economies are right now, where they might be going, and how Cardano might fit into all that. I feel like something's going on. If you go back to this article, this is an article which apparently was authored by Charles back in April of 2021. This article was called "Identity is the Key to Our Vision for Africa." The important part of this article for this discussion is clear down here at the bottom. So if we go all the way down here, we see this sentence. It says, I believe that over the next 5 years, as this technology rolls out across all of Africa and many other parts of the world, such as what I notice about lists like this, when people are writing lists, they tend not to, when they're authoring these types of lists, they tend not to randomize the lists. They tend to write the lists in order of perceived priority. And you notice in this list, Charles wrote Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe, that these promises can be transformed into new business models. The first country he listed was Southeast Asia. In between then and now, April of this year and now, I believe we've also heard Charles mention Southeast Asia a couple times in his AMAs. This has been interesting because we don't know of many projects in Southeast Asia. They haven't talked a lot about Southeast Asia, but we also heard about Southeast Asia from someone else in IOHK. This was a really good interview between Big Pei and John O'Connor. And in this interview, Pei asked a lot of the right questions. And one of the questions he asked was basically aimed at, hey, what is it going to take? When is it going to happen when IOG and Cardano go to some other continents besides Africa? So John O'Connor was like, well, we're in Mongolia, we're in Georgia. And then the next region of the world he mentioned was Southeast Asia. This happens at about the 2647 mark. And then 12 seconds later, he again says, we'll need to have regional strategies because what you need to do in Southeast Asia is different than what you need to do in Africa. Within 12 seconds, he mentioned Southeast Asia twice when the question was just generally, the question didn't mention Asia or any particular part of the world. It was just like, when are we going to see some activity outside of Africa? So, of course, John mentioned Mongolia and Georgia, where we've known that Cardano's had activities. And then within 12 seconds, he mentioned Southeast Asia twice. What is Southeast Asia? It depends on who you ask, but according to Wikipedia, it's roughly these areas. If you ask a lot of people in the West, they're going to home in on these areas right here. They're probably going to mention Burma, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, maybe Malaysia. They might even mention Singapore. But we actually have this association of Southeast Asian nations, and it includes 10 countries and like some observer countries and some candidate countries. And it's all of these countries in blue right here. So it includes the Philippines and Indonesia and Brunei and some other candidate countries. But basically, it's the distinction between mainland Southeast Asia and maritime Southeast Asia. It's important to note here that the population of Southeast Asia as a region is more than 500 million, 655 million, and the nominal GDP is over 3 trillion. This is big. That population is over 5.5 times larger than the 117 million people in Ethiopia, and it's obviously hundreds of times larger than the 3.3 million people in Mongolia or the 4 million people in Georgia. This one, not this one. I know what you're thinking. That wasn't a fair comparison because I was comparing the entire region of Southeast Asia with just individual countries. But if you look at Indonesia alone within Southeast Asia, it's over double the size of Ethiopia. Both the Philippines and Vietnam are approaching the size of Ethiopia's population, and Thailand is over half the size of Ethiopia. And of course, Ethiopia is just a stepping stone into the rest of sub Saharan Africa and maybe even North Africa, based on Charles's tweet the other day about Egypt. But even if we look at the entire population of sub Saharan Africa, we come up with this number of a little bit over a billion. At that number, Southeast Asia at 655 million is something like 63% the size of all of sub-Saharan Africa in terms of population. Here's where it starts to get interesting. The World Bank tells us that the nominal GDP of all of sub-Saharan Africa is something like 1.6 or 7 trillion. The nominal GDP of Southeast Asia is over 3.3 trillion. So something a little bit more than double sub-Saharan Africa. And we see quite the spectrum of economic development across Southeast Asia. You've got places like the city-state of Singapore, which no matter how you cut it, is one of the richest cities in the world. The notoriously resource-rich Sultanate of Brunei, all the way down to countries like East Timor, which are obviously on the other end of the economic spectrum from Singapore and Brunei. However, in between those two extremes is a different economic circumstance that I think could be a magical opportunity for Cardano right now. The GDPs of just Indonesia right here at 1.1 trillion and Thailand at over 500 billion, just those two countries together are about the same size as all of sub-Saharan Africa. I'm not presenting this as a better opportunity than Africa. I'm presenting it as a different opportunity that's very complementary to the Pan-Africa strategy. Here's what I mean by that. The Pan-Africa strategy might be the very best long-term play. We've spent a lot of time on this channel talking about how Africa is predicted by many to be the area of biggest growth, economic growth, in the entire world over these longer timelines, the next 20 years, the next couple decades. Africa is probably going to be the area of greatest growth economically in the entire world. That might be the perfect long-term play for an ecosystem like Cardano. The short-term play was Europe, North America, and East Asia, the richest parts of the world currently. Barring these very, very resource-rich areas like the Gulf and Brunei and some outliers like Singapore. A lot of the economic resources are concentrated in Europe, North America, and East Asia. That was the short-term play. Cardano's original ICO was in East Asia. It was in Japan, and there were other investors from other parts of East Asia. A few investors from Thailand snuck in there. Maybe a few other places. You can see all that on the Cardano Foundation website. But it was mainly an East Asia ICO, and the secondary markets were kind of dominated by North America and Europe. That was the short-term play for Cardano to get on the stage. The long-term play is the Pan-Africa strategy. The middle-term play, the perfect middle-term play, might be Southeast Asia, and not necessarily the extremes, but these economies that are in between those two extremes, not the Singapore or the Brunei, although certainly Cardano is attractive to investors in Singapore. But I think there's a big opportunity here in countries like Malaysia at a per capita GDP of 34K, Thailand at 21K, Indonesia at 14K, the Philippines at 10K, and both Laos and Vietnam climbing up towards 9K. Granted, these are purchasing power parity GDP numbers, which means they take into account the cost of goods in these countries, but still, these are pretty significant per capita numbers. In a lot of the big cities in these countries, you already have significant levels of connectivity. It's a very different circumstance than a lot of the places in sub-Saharan Africa. And I totally know what you're thinking. If you've been in Southeast Asia, you're like, yeah, but in the countryside, it's a very different circumstance. True. And there is a significant amount of connect the unconnected type stuff we can do in rural areas in these countries. But in a lot of the big cities, it's a totally different circumstance. The connectivity is already at such a significant level that we can fast forward through that whole part of the process. They already have enough people already have a high enough level of connectivity that we can skip a lot of that infrastructure building part of the process and just introduce the blockchain part of it. I think this next stat about Thailand is kind of revealing of exactly what I'm talking about. So 2021 estimate of the population of Thailand, this is the entire country, 69,950,850. Of that number, 55.42 million have smartphones. That's like 80% of the population. And we're not just talking about young affluent professionals in the cities here. That's the entire population, rural, urban, almost everybody in all types of areas already has smartphones. If you look at semi-affluent young professionals in the cities, that number is sky high. Everybody's already connected. And honestly, for those types of people in the cities, in a lot of ways, it becomes kind of hard to distinguish their experience and quality of life from their counterparts in the West. Here's the cool part. Even in Thailand, which is one of the most developed countries in this region, and a country of, approaching 700 million people, you only have 697,000 cryptocurrency accounts in the whole country. That's what CoinDesk is reporting this year in May. That's less than 1%. Think about this for a second. You've got 80% of the people with smartphones. They've already got the connectivity necessary to use crypto, but less than 1% as many cryptocurrency accounts as people. A lot of those are going to be, a single person owning multiple accounts. So you've got way less than 1% of the people who've been exposed to crypto. This means they're ready and prepared for Cardano, but they're probably not already indoctrinated with all the Ethereum propaganda. In the US this year, we've seen media outlets like CNBC tell us that the number is more like 13%. In the EU, we see similar numbers of around 11%. So what clues do we have so far about what Cardano is actually doing in Southeast Asia? There seems to be something going on with Cardano in Southeast Asia. We just have no idea what it is. The only few clues we have are that Emergo has been involved with their track and trace solutions with this Blue Kerinci coffee company in Indonesia and Alco Coffee Cooperative. So Alco appears to be a coffee cooperative and processing operation in Sumatra. Blue Kerinci Coffee is a local coffee brand. And tied up in the news releases, there's been talk about doing the track and trace to places like China, specifically where the coffee might be consumed. And they say that the Alco coffee also ends up in places like Japan, India, and the United States, and of course consumed locally in Indonesia. That's a supply chain tracing solution for one product from one island in one of these countries in Southeast Asia. But it seems like when Cardano, especially IOHK, when they're talking so much about a certain region of the world, like they were about Africa before the Ministry of Education in Ethiopia deal was laid out for us, it seems like they're usually talking about something more at the level of nation state adoption. I wouldn't be at all surprised if at the Cardano Summit we find out that Cardano has made a deal with some ministry of one of these governments. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Indonesia or the Philippines. And it might be something along the lines of digital identity. It might be similar to the Ministry of Education deal in Ethiopia. Might be something like that. I would love it if it's something bigger, like if it were remittances for almost any of these countries, so that their diaspora abroad, when they send money back home, could do it via Cardano as opposed to the normal fiat rails. I hope it's something like that. We don't really know, though. It could be anything, but I have this strange feeling that we might find out soon. I'm hoping it's at the Cardano Summit. If not, I kind of have a feeling something in Southeast Asia for Cardano is going to pop in 2021. We'll have to wait and find out. Talk to you tomorrow.